I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And I'm stuck up. No, you're not going to get the singing version of I'm Just a Bill. I won't subject you to that. But what we are going to do is walk you through the steps and how a bill becomes a law and the ins and outs of what you'll need to know for the exam, and also what you need to know as a citizen as far as our lawmaking process. Now, keep in mind, this is the first civics lesson you ever got as a kid watching the ABC cartoons in the mornings. So it's something we're familiar with, but going to be a little more complicated than what we've learned before. Okay. Now, here's a question from 2009 that they asked. So this is an idea of how the College Board would ask a question regarding um, how a bill becomes a law. So you'll see the stem of the question, rather long one at that in the U.S. Congress, the majority party exerts a substantial influence over lawmaking. However, even when one party has a numerical majority in each chamber of the U.S. Congress, there is no guarantee that legislation supported by that majority party will be passed in both chambers. Rules of each chamber independently influence the likelihood that legislation will pass in that chamber. Legislation passed by one chamber is not always passed by the other. And we're kind of seeing that right now. However, the House and Senate are controlled by different parties. This is kind of talking about where both houses are by the same party. So we're going to describe two advantages the majority party has in the House of Representatives in lawmaking above and beyond the numerical advantage that the majority party enjoys in floor voting. A majority in the House is 218 or more. Part B, we're going to describe two differences between House and Senate rules that may make it likely that legislation may pass in one chamber but not in the other. And then part C, now this is one of those questions where you don't want to label B and C on the side, all right? Because in C, you're explaining how the differences identified in B can lead to passage of a bill in one chamber but not in the other. All right, so while your description here may have been an explanation, if you don't clearly explain that in C, which you might feel is redundant, they will not give you the point. But if you just label it as one big paragraph and have your description here and an explanation here, you probably will get full credit. All right, so let's go through the notes here, and then at the end of the notes, let's see if you're able to answer this question. I'm not going to give you the answers. We'll discuss these in class if you have them, but this is an example of a question you might see. All right, so first step in introducing a bill. House of Representatives is where revenue bills have to originate, so any bill dealing with taxes, and then the Senate can introduce legislation also. So the bill does not have to start in the House unless it's a revenue bill. All right, so both can introduce them that way. And then in the House, they actually submit it into what's called a hopper, which is a big box where you submit the bill. In the Senate, you kind of read it from the floor. So you're going to find out that the Senate has a lot more informal rules, and it's kind of more of a good old boy club kind of thing where you just have 100 members working together as opposed to the House, which follows a very formulaic pattern. In the once the bill is written, all right, it gets assigned a number, so you'll have HR 5280 or SB 710, all right, and then the chairman of the House or Senate will send it to a committee which will review the bill. So most of the work done in Congress is done in committees. Woodrow Wilson said that Congress in committee is Congress at work. All right. Now your major committees, all right, are your standing committees. Standing committees are permanent. Those exist from one Congress to the next, will always be there, all right, and exist from one Congress to the next. In the House, your book has a complete listing of these, but in the House, some of the main ones are appropriations. They're the ones that spend the money. So if you're on the Appropriations Committee, you get to dole out the money. A Rules Committee, which we'll talk about a little more later. And then the House has a Ways and Means Committee. Now notice the House does not have, or the Senate doesn't have a Ways and Means Committee. So we hopefully figure out that the Ways and Means Committee deals with, yes, you guessed it, revenue bills. All right, so all tax legislation starts at Ways and Means. Think of it as the House has to find the ways and the means to raise the funds. The Senate has an Appropriations Committee that gets to spend the money. A Finance Committee that can only amend tax legislation, not write it, but they can amend existing tax laws. Senate has a Judiciary Committee. That's where most of your judicial confirmation hearings take place. We'll be watching some of those on the Daily Show when we get to our judicial unit. And then a Foreign Relations Committee, that's significant because that's where most treaties have to get approved. Now, there's also select committees. These are also called ad hoc committees. They are temporary. They exist to deal with one issue. When that issue is dealt with, the committee dissolves and goes away. Probably a more famous one is there was a Senate or a House Select Committee on assassinations to study Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy assassinations back in the 1970s. There was a super committee that was formed, a select super committee that was supposed to resolve the financial crisis 2 years ago, and that kind of failed. But that was just temporary to deal with one issue. All right, joint committees. That is where most medicinal marijuana cases are addressed and dealt with, and any legislation pertaining to that. No, just kidding. It's late, and I got to have a good sense of humor here. Those are committees made up of both House members and Senate members to deal with issues. Either some big ones and some are more formal ones. Like there was a joint committee on the inauguration, for example. And then a conference committee you need to know also. Those will be addressed later on in the notes. All right. So now the bill goes to committee. All right. Sometimes that bill is going to be assigned to a subcommittee. All right. The subcommittee's job is to study the bill in further detail. All right, and form a report, learn some more information, and report back to the main committee. All right. The chairperson may choose not to send it to a subcommittee and just ignore the bill. All right. That is called pigeonholing. All right, meaning that the chairperson will not schedule a vote on the bill, and the bill just dies. They call it a pigeonhole because if you can think of the old desks where they used to have the inkwells, chairpersons would roll the bills up, slide it into the pigeonhole on the desk because it looks like a pigeon kind of pecked the desk apart, and the bill would just sit there and die. All right? Now, in the House, when that happens, a member can create a discharge petition which forces the bill out of committee and forces a vote on the floor, but you need a majority vote. All right? Now, are those used often? No. Why? Because the chairperson of a committee is also a member of the majority party. Hint, hint, that goes back to the question I asked you at the beginning of the notes. And if the chairperson's from the majority, odds are you're not going to get the majority party to go against that said chairperson. So discharge petitions exist, but they are rarely used. All right? Sometimes they will hold a hearing to study the bill in more detail, get more information, etc. They'll call witnesses and things like that. Subcommittees then report their findings to the full committee. The full committee will vote on the bill and decide if they want to pass it or not. If the full committee passes it, then it will go to the floor for a vote. Sometimes a bill can be killed in committee, depending on the discussion or makeup of the bill. Okay? After the bill is passed, they have what's called a markup session. This is where they make a bunch of amendments and riders to the bill, where they add in spending provisions, all right, or just different changes to the bill before it goes to the full floor. That's when you'll see your pork barrel inserted, which is what you're going to be debating on Thursday. Well, you'll add in, a bike trail for this district, or a new water tower for that district, or a military base or something like that to kind of please the different members. So if you're on the committees that write the bills, you get to put a lot of pork in. All right? Now, a rider is a spending provision that has nothing to do with the bill. All right? But it's a spending provision thrown in because you know the bill is going to pass, so you stick something in it to make sure it gets added to help your district out. So leads to a little bit of the credit claiming. And then an amendment is a change to the bill. All right? So a bill might call for, a 2-year extension of, some program, and you can amend that to say 3 years. Okay? The House has something called the Germaneness Rule, where the amendment to the bill has to be germane to the bill itself. Okay, so if there's a bill about transportation and I want to amend it, the amendment has to deal with transportation. The Senate does not have a germaneness rule. The Senate can take a transportation bill and write something in there about education. All right, now if that bill passes, it is sent to the floor for a full vote. All right. Now we are going to stop there. All right, because we're at 10 minutes. This is going to give you a break, and we're going to record a new video starting with what happens after the bill passes a committee. Thank you.